Return what you took, right now. That was the command, a verdict disguised as authority, delivered in broad daylight to a black woman standing silently inside a luxury jewelry store. Her name was Alana Rivers. She wore a simple gray hoodie. And in that moment, to a white officer and a wealthy customer, that's all they saw. They didn't ask for proof. They didn't check the cameras. They didn't know they were accusing the highest-ranking SWAT commander in the state. But they were about to find out. What began as a humiliating false accusation quickly unraveled into a national reckoning, exposing a hidden brotherhood of power, corruption, and racial bias buried deep inside law enforcement. What they thought would be an easy takedown of a nobody became the spark that shattered a decades-old silence. This isn't just the story of one woman's dignity under fire. It's the story of how she turned that fire into a force the entire system could no longer ignore. So if you've ever wondered what happens when truth finally walks into the room and refuses to leave, watch closely, because Alana didn't flinch. She made the system blink. Now, before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day, and drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you, and now let's get back to the story. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to take your hands out of your pockets, slowly. The officer's voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a gavel, sharp, cold, and absolute. Alana Rivers didn't flinch. She looked up from the necklace in the glass case, her reflection flickering in the polished surface like a whisper of someone she used to be. Her voice, when it came, was smooth, measured, calm. I haven't touched anything. I was just asking for a price. The man in uniform took a step forward. His boots echoed over the oak wood floors of Langston & Blythe Fine Jewelers, a luxury boutique tucked neatly between high-rise banks and marble-floored coffee shops in downtown Charlotte. To anyone watching from outside, it would have looked like a calm day in an upscale jewelry store. But inside, a storm was building. Not from noise, but from the cold hum of suspicion and the silence of bystanders who had already made up their minds. Officer Grant Mercer, mid-30s, fair-skinned and built like someone who relied more on his belt than his brain, stood a little straighter now. His coffee cup rested abandoned on the counter near the door. One hand hovered near his holster, the other slowly gestured to the small black purse slung across Alana's chest. "You match a description," he said. And though he didn't specify what that meant, the words were already working their way through the room like poison. The blonde woman in the back, the one in the floor-length evening dress and high-end perfume, Madison Vickery, let out a soft scoff of approval. She had been watching from the moment Alana entered, eyes flicking toward her like clockwork. Alana remained still, composed. Her hoodie sleeves hugged her wrists, her posture relaxed but precise. She knew this game. She'd lived it before, 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different rooms. But today was different. This time, the uniform didn't know who he was speaking to. Earlier that afternoon, the sky over Charlotte had been a watercolor of soft gray and amber, touched by the hint of evening. Alana had driven in alone, no entourage, no badge on her belt, no brass to announce her. She parked a few blocks away to enjoy the walk, dressed in fitted dark jeans, ankle boots, and a plain charcoal hoodie. Her face was bare, her expression unreadable. She looked like any other woman running an errand after work, except she wasn't. Commander Alana Rivers was the highest-ranking officer in the State Tactical Response Division, a position she earned not through politics or legacy, but through blood, sweat, and moments most men wouldn't survive. But she never carried that in her walk. She didn't wear her accolades like armor. Today wasn't about proving anything. It was about a gift. A simple necklace, an amethyst pendant her aunt would love, the same aunt who had raised her, who had been a nurse through 2 wars, who had just survived a long, brutal chemotherapy battle. Alana was here for her, not to command, not to defend, just to say, thank you for still being here. But even now, with her intentions as pure as glass, she could feel the shift in the air, like walking into a room already waiting for her to fail. "I saw her take something," Madison said now, tilting her head slightly toward Officer Mercer. Her voice dripped with confidence, like a woman used to being believed. Alana turned toward her slowly. "Excuse me?" Madison didn't blink. "When you leaned forward, you slipped something into your pocket. It looked like a bracelet." There it was, the script. No evidence, no alarm, just accusation dressed in pearls and entitlement. Mercer didn't hesitate. He moved forward again, now only a step away. I'm gonna have to ask you to open your pockets. Alana looked at him fully now. Not with anger, not with fear, just sadness. Do you have any footage? She asked, nodding toward the security camera directly above them. Because I'm sure that will show I didn't steal anything. Mercer's jaw tightened. Ma'am, refusing to comply. I'm not refusing, she interrupted softly. I'm asserting my rights. You don't get to turn suspicion into guilt just because someone pointed a finger. Madison took a performative step back, gasping faintly like a stage actress. She's getting aggressive now. Alana chuckled under her breath. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. The store clerk behind the counter, a young man in a tailored vest, pretended to reorganize display cases. He had heard every word, and he had said nothing. Alana turned to him. I asked you for a price. Twice. He didn't meet her eyes. The tension thickened. The silence now was not one of peace, but of complicity. Mercer unhooked his radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Mercer at Langston and Blythe. Suspect is non-compliant, matching theft profile, requesting backup. And just like that, her identity vanished, replaced by a word, suspect. Now before the story continues, please take a second to subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every single day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you. And now, back to the story. Alana didn't move. Not because she was afraid, but because moving would validate the theater they were staging. In this scene, she had been cast without audition. In this scene, the outcome had already been written, but she wasn't here to play their part. She looked Mercer squarely in the eyes. You've made a mistake, he smirked. That's for the department to decide. Good, she said, because someone from the department will be arriving shortly. He blinked. Excuse me? But before she could speak again, the store's glass door opened with a soft chime. A woman entered. Black, mid-40s, tailored navy blazer, high bun hair, calm steps with a pulse of command in each one. The air inside the store pulled tight like a wire. Major Leah Thornton had arrived. Her voice wasn't loud, but every syllable landed like stone. Officer Mercer? Do you even know who she is? He turned slowly. The calm expression on Leah's face unnerved him more than a scream would have. What? I said. She stepped into the light. Do you know who you're accusing? The store went silent. Even Madison's performative breath caught in her throat. Alana stayed still. Leah continued. That woman you just called in, she's Commander Alana Rivers, the tactical commander for the entire Southeastern Operations Unit. She has led more rescue missions than you've logged arrests. Mercer's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was history rewriting itself in real time. Officer Grant Mercer's fingers twitched near his belt, not on his gun, not yet, but just close enough to remind the room of the hierarchy he thought he still commanded. He stared at Major Leah Thornton like he'd misheard, as if the calm woman in front of him had spoken in some foreign dialect. Truth. Commander? He repeated, the word brittle in his mouth. Alana Rivers turned slowly, her gaze sliding over Madison Vickery, who had now stepped back so far she nearly bumped into the glass shelving of emerald earrings behind her. You didn't think someone like me could wear that title, did you? Alana asked softly. She didn't have to raise her voice. Because what she carried, beneath the hoodie, beneath the quiet eyes, beneath the skin too often mistaken for permission, was undeniable now. Authority. The clerk who had ignored her earlier blinked rapidly, suddenly remembering how to speak. I didn't know. I mean, no one told me. Alana didn't look at him. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. The time for soft explanations had passed. She stepped forward, unzipped her hoodie slowly, and reached into the inside pocket. Out came a leather wallet, slim and official. She unfastened it like a ceremony and revealed the metal badge within. State Tactical Response Division, Commander Alana Rivers Clearance, Alpha 1. The gold seal reflected the boutique lights, shining in precise geometric patterns. For a moment, no one breathed. Madison's mouth hung open like she might say something, might offer a stuttered defense, a backpedal wrapped in grace, but the words never arrived. Instead, she clutched her purse tighter, as if that could protect her from the truth now circling her like a spotlight. Major Thornton tilted her head, arms crossed. "Officer Mercer," she said, "you profiled a woman, accused her of theft without cause, called for backup, and attempted an illegal search, all under the eye of store surveillance." Mercer looked to the camera above them for the first time, as if just now realizing it had existed. "And," Leah continued, stepping beside Alana, "you did this not to a civilian, not to a person without resources, but to your superior in chain of command." Mercer's face turned a pale, blistering red. His voice came out flat, choked. "I didn't know." "No," Alana interrupted, stepping forward. "You didn't care to know." That line hit harder than any raised voice could. It wasn't fury, it was fact. Madison's hand went to her phone again, but this time, not to live stream. She tucked it into her purse as if it burned her fingers. The clerk finally found the courage to speak. "Commander, would you like me to get the manager?" Alana turned her head slowly, gaze sweeping over the display case where the necklace still lay, untouched, glinting purple under the lights. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No," she said, "he should be out here already." 15 minutes later, the store manager, a nervous man in a three-piece suit, was stammering apologies as security footage played back in the boutique's surveillance room. The screen showed the entire incident. Alana's entry, her quiet browsing, her calm voice asking for a price, the way she picked up the necklace gently, admired it, and placed it back. No quick movements, no theft, no concealment. Then came the damning parts. Madison stepping forward, whispering falsehoods. Mercer's immediate reaction. No questions, no verification, just judgment executed on sight. A second feed from another angle showed something else. The store clerks watching it all unfold, doing nothing, saying nothing, letting it happen, like they always had. The manager looked up from the screen, his face pale, sweat blooming across his brow. I didn't realize," he murmured. "No," Major Thornton said calmly. "You just didn't intervene. There's a difference." They returned to the boutique floor, where the tension still hadn't left the air. A couple who had wandered in during the commotion had quietly stepped back outside, sensing something sacred was unraveling in real time. Alana placed the badge gently on the same glass case that once separated her from a simple purchase. Then, with fingers precise and calm, she zipped up her hoodie again. "You treated me like a suspect," she said, her voice even, "because of how I looked, not because of anything I did." Mercer was silent. Madison tried to speak again, but Leah silenced her with a single look. "Commander Rivers," she said softly. "Do you recognize him?" Alana turned slowly. Her eyes studied Mercer, not with fear, not with rage, but with memory. "I do." Her voice dropped slightly. "Southwest District, spring of 2017, Eden Street operation. He was a rookie. Panicked during a hostage breach. Fired early. Nearly got one of our guys killed." Mercer's eyes widened. "You rewrote that report?" she continued. "You could have filed to end his career, but you didn't." Leah turned slowly to Alana, stunned. "You gave him a second chance?" she asked. Alana nodded. "Because I believed people could change." She looked back at Mercer. "But you didn't. You didn't grow. You got comfortable, and now your comfort has become a weapon." Mercer's lips parted. But the man who once barked orders in a boutique now stood silent as a scolded child. And just then, the door opened again. Another man stepped in, Chief Samuel King. He didn't speak right away, didn't ask for context, didn't need to. His eyes scanned the room, clerk, manager, Mercer, Madison, the security cameras. Then they settled on Alana. "Commander," he said, nodding once, "I saw the footage." Mercer stiffened. King didn't even glance at him. "Officer Mercer," he said. "Remove your badge and weapon. Now." The words weren't shouted. They didn't have to be. They rang with the finality of justice. Mercer hesitated for a heartbeat. Then slowly, his hands moved, first to the badge, unclipping it from his chest, then to the firearm, which he placed gently on the same glass counter he had once tried to block Alana from reaching, the same counter where she had stood accused. Now he was the one being disarmed. Chief King collected the items, handed them to Major Thornton, and said nothing more. Madison backed toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one needed to. She knew she no longer had a place in the room. As the doors whispered shut behind her, Alana turned to the others. The clerk, the manager, the security camera blinking red in the corner. She didn't ask for an apology. She didn't need one. Because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about every woman like her. Every person who had been stopped, accused, humiliated, without evidence, without cause. And finally, someone had said enough. "You know what bothers me the most?" Alana said quietly, as she stood beside Major Leah Thornton in the narrow surveillance office of Langston and Blythe. It was later that evening. The store had closed early. Most of the staff had left, save for the manager, the youngest clerk, and a security technician named Ray, thin, pale, and visibly uncomfortable under the fluorescent buzz. "What?" Leah asked, still scanning the screens. "That Mercer didn't even hesitate," Alana said. "He didn't weigh facts, didn't check footage, didn't even ask me to explain. A single look, and he decided I was a thief." Leah nodded, her jaw tight. "That's not a mistake. That's training." Ray, sitting before the terminal, glanced nervously over his shoulder. Alana stepped behind him, arms folded. "Rewind the camera. I want to see who else he's stopped." Ray hesitated. "Commander, I only handle the past 2 weeks of footage. Longer archives get stored off-site. Then we'll start with 2 weeks." With a few clicks, the footage began to roll backward. The same boutique, same glass cases, but different faces, different targets. A young black woman in medical scrubs approached the sapphire rings. Mercer appeared beside her seconds later, blocking her path. No gesture of welcome. No questions. Just surveillance under the pretense of security. Another clip. A teenage boy in a hoodie, no different than what Alana had worn that day, lingered near the entrance. Mercer approached from behind, demanding identification. The boy complied. Nothing came of it. Still another. An elderly black man walking with a cane asked a clerk for a gift bag. Within 30 seconds, Mercer inserted himself into the interaction. Clip after clip after clip. Same officer, same cold posture, same calculated pressure, different black faces. Alana watched in silence, not out of shock but recognition. "I've seen this before," she said finally. "Men like Mercer, built on arrogance and protected by quiet systems." Leah leaned closer to the monitor. "He wasn't operating alone, was he?" Alana exhaled. "No, he's part of something bigger. A network that doesn't need a name badge to exist." Ray swallowed hard. "Actually, it has a name." Both women turned toward him. Ray's voice was almost a whisper. "We call it Circle 7. In the weeks prior, a name had begun surfacing on internal rosters, whispered in side corridors of the justice system. Circle 7. A euphemistic title. Harmless, bureaucratic. Officially, it was a peer integrity unit. An internal subgroup formed to support officer well-being and uphold departmental unity. Unofficially, it was a shield for misconduct, for racial profiling, for rewriting the narrative. Alana had encountered its handiwork before. Reports rewritten with neutral language, body cam footage that mysteriously went missing, disciplinary files sealed for departmental discretion. Now, watching Mercer's behavior unfold like a script performed by habit, she saw it clearly. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. "Pull everything you've got," Alana told Ray. "Every log, every shift Mercer's worked, every body Mercer stopped." Ray paused. "That could be hundreds of entries. Then start printing." Leah rested a hand on Ray's shoulder. "We'll handle the rest." As he complied, the quiet hum of the printer filled the room. Sheet after sheet spilled onto the table. Names, timestamps, descriptions. A pattern. No one had seen it in full because no one had stitched it together, until now. Later that night, Alana sat at her kitchen table, the reports spread like puzzle pieces before her. She highlighted names, circled repeat locations, drew connecting lines between complaints that had once been dismissed as isolated officer discretion. She flipped through a folder marked Suppressed Incidents. Her own compilation, notes, testimonies, and archived reports from colleagues over the years who'd confided in her. A Latina officer pressured to tone down her accent. A black detective reassigned after flagging profiling. A Muslim cadet who disappeared from the academy after an anonymous security concern was raised. She wrote only 2 words across the top of the folder in bold red ink. Structural rot. The next day, Major Leah Thornton arrived at her door with coffee and the latest transcript from Mercer's pending review. "They're trying to flip it," Leah said. "His union filed a motion accusing you of professional misconduct." Alana raised an eyebrow. "For what? Refusing to be humiliated? They're spinning it as dereliction of decorum and public discrediting of a fellow officer." Alana laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "So I'm the threat now." "Not just you, me too. Chief King, anyone who didn't toe the line." Alana nodded slowly. Then they're scared. Good. She handed Leah a stack of printed footage logs. These names, she said. Start calling them, the ones who might talk. We're building a file, one they can't bury. Leah flipped through the list. Some names had asterisks beside them, people Alana remembered as strong, brave, but bruised by the system enough to be cautious. She looked up. You sure you want to take this further? Alana didn't hesitate. I don't want revenge, she said. I want correction. That afternoon she received a letter. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. The words wavered slightly. Ink thick in some places, faded in others. The handwriting of someone unsure whether they had the right to speak, but choosing to anyway. My name is Olivia Dunley. I work as a custodian at Langston and Blythe. 3 years ago, Officer Mercer stopped my daughter. She was 17, walking home from school in her uniform. He made her turn to the wall, called her garbage, yelled at her in public. She came home crying. A few months later, she was gone. No one believed me. I was undocumented. They said there wasn't enough evidence. But I never forgot his name. I just want someone to remember hers. The signature at the bottom was shaky but clear. Olivia Dunley, mother of Yasmin Dunley, age 17. Gone. Erased. Alana lowered the letter. Her breath came slowly now. This was never about a necklace. It was about how many daughters had been disappeared by silence. That night, Alana added Yasmin's name to the front of her file. Not under victim. Not under incident. But under witness. Because even if the system had silenced her, Alana would not. She whispered her name aloud once, Yasmin Dunley, and felt the weight of the story settle into her chest like stone. Then she turned on her desk light, picked up a pen, and began writing what would become the opening line of the most damning report her department had ever seen. They thought she was just another black woman in a hoodie. They never imagined she was the one person with the authority to make the system look at itself and flinch. You didn't just profile me, Alana whispered, her voice barely audible under the low hum of the desk lamp. You profiled every girl who ever wore a hoodie and kept her hands in her pockets because the world kept taking things from her. The words weren't meant for anyone in the room. There was no audience, just the echo of memory and a letter from a grieving mother folded at the edge of her desk. Alana stared at it for a long time before opening a manila folder and writing across the tab in bold black ink. Case 47. Yasmin Dunley. Status: previously unfiled, initiating posthumous review. She didn't need to think about what to do next. Her hands moved with the quiet rhythm of purpose. She opened her laptop, pulled up archived 911 logs from the Eastview neighborhood, cross-referencing the month Olivia mentioned. It didn't take long. The call had been brief, faint audio, a girl's voice, breathless, scared. I didn't do anything. He's making me stand here. I want to go home. Then the line went dead. There was no follow-up, no body cam footage filed, no disciplinary notes, just a scribbled line in the dispatch logs. Resolved, suspect released, no further action. No suspect, no crime. Just a girl in a uniform who disappeared in silence. Alana leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The next morning, Major Leah Thornton stepped into her office and paused when she saw the wall. Alana had covered it with printouts, photos, hand-drawn connections, names circled in red. Dotted lines running from body cam timestamps to officer logs to dismissed complaints. At the center of it all was a single name. Circle 7, an unofficial enforcement clique operating across multiple precincts under the guise of peer support. Its members shared one thing in common: they protected each other against racial misconduct charges. Is this what I think it is? Leah asked, stepping closer. It's a pattern, Alana said, but it's also a structure, built like a scaffolding, held together by silence. She handed Leah a file marked Tier 1, Unredacted Profiles. Inside were the names of 6 officers, Mercer among them, whose careers had survived investigations, all with mysteriously altered records. Each tied back to internal references from Circle 7. Leah scanned them. Some of these guys were promoted, Alana nodded, rewarded for loyalty, not ethics. Leah looked up. You're preparing for war. I'm preparing for truth, Alana said. But if they want a war, they'll get one with footnotes and timestamps. By Friday, the binder was complete. 108 pages, annotated, cross-referenced. It contained body cam inconsistencies, complaint summaries from citizens across racial lines, psychological profiles of affected minors, including post-trauma assessments, testimonies from silent officers who had seen, heard, and finally decided to speak. Alana had labeled it simply, Internal Disparity Audit Phase 1. But this wasn't an audit. It was an indictment. She mailed 3 copies, one to the State Oversight Board, one to Internal Affairs, and one to the independent civilian watchdog agency that had been collecting dust for years. Then she sat in her car outside HQ for nearly 30 minutes, holding a 4th copy in her lap, unsure whether to deliver it in person to Chief Samuel King. Not because she feared his reaction, but because she knew once she handed it over, she couldn't take it back. She would no longer be one of the good ones the department leaned on to show its progress. She'd become the mirror. And no one likes the person holding the mirror. As she was about to step out, her phone buzzed. A new message. No number. My name's Mia. I saw what happened at Langston and Blythe. That Officer Mercer? He arrested my brother last year. Said he looked too nervous near a bank. He was 12. I have no video, but I have the story. Alana closed her eyes. Another thread. Another wound. She texted back, tell me everything. You matter. He matters. 3 days later, she held the first community testimony session in a borrowed church basement on the west side of the city. No media, no press, just a folding table, 2 chairs, a recorder, and a sign that read, "We see you, speak here." By the end of the night, she had 17 testimonies. A father who'd been forced to the curb in front of his children. A teenager who had been slammed against a locker for walking too fast in a white neighborhood. A grandmother followed home from a pharmacy because her bag looked suspiciously heavy. Each story had one common thread. Circle 7. Different faces, same template. Mercer's name came up in 6. Alana added a tab to the binder titled Undocumented Pattern Recognition. The stories may not all have video, but the weight of them together was its own kind of evidence. A living ledger of neglect. That same week, Alana received a letter from a former SWAT officer she'd once trained. Caleb Hunt. White, tactical, respected. Left the force quietly 4 years ago. His letter was brief. When I left, I was told it was for mental clarity. The truth? I couldn't stand what I saw anymore. I watched a kid get called a predator because he was tall and black. I reported it. Circle 7 made me invisible. But I've still got my notes, and I'll stand beside you if you're ready to burn it down. She called him immediately. By midnight, his notes had been added to the file. Alana didn't feel powerful. She felt exhausted. But for the first time in her career, she didn't feel alone. On a rainy Wednesday morning, she returned to the surveillance room at Langston and Blythe. The store had since been closed for repairs, but the manager had left her a key and access to the archive. She pulled up the oldest footage they had from Mercer's first year stationed there, and that's when she saw it. A girl, young, barely 17, school backpack, braided hair, Yasmin Dunley. Alana's breath caught in her chest. The footage was clear, the interaction sharp. The moment Mercer singled her out, he blocked her path. She tried to smile. He reached for his belt. She shook her head. He made her turn to face the wall. It lasted 6 minutes. No one intervened. When it ended, Yasmin walked away, but her shoulders slumped, her head low, her gait broken. Alana paused the footage. Her hand shook as she scribbled a note on the file. Visual confirmation secured. And then, without thinking, she whispered, "Yasmin, they won't erase you again." Outside, the rain softened to mist. Alana stood at the store's glass doors, looking out onto the quiet sidewalk. For years, people had walked past these windows, not realizing the weight of what happened behind them. But now, this place wasn't just a boutique, it was a battleground. And she had the first piece of truth on her side. She pressed her badge against the glass, not for security, not for power, but for reflection. She didn't see a commander anymore. She saw a woman finally daring to speak for the daughters who never got to finish their sentence. The room wasn't large, it was quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence born from reverence, but the kind that settled in when a system knew it was about to be forced to look at itself in the mirror. The hearing chamber inside the State Oversight Building had no cameras, no press, no decorative flourishes, just heavy curtains over the windows, dim lighting, and a U-shaped table occupied by 8 men and women in dark suits, each with a nameplate, each with a stack of files they'd likely only skimmed. Alana Rivers stepped into the room precisely at 9 a.m. Not early, not late. She wore no uniform, no badge, no visible symbols of authority, only a charcoal gray suit. Crisp, clean, deliberate. In her right hand, she carried a slim black leather case. In her left, she held nothing, because she didn't need to. Major Leah Thornton sat quietly in the back row, along with Caleb Hunt and a former academy instructor named Marcus Lyle, both of whom had contributed to the internal investigation. None of them spoke. Their presence was statement enough. The chair at the center of the room, a single steel-backed seat facing the oversight board, waited. Alana didn't pause. She sat, calmly placed her leather case on the table, and looked each board member in the eye. No one offered her a smile. No one looked particularly comfortable either. Which meant they knew. "Commander Rivers," began a gray-haired man near the center, his voice formal, almost robotic. "We are convened today to review your claims regarding procedural misconduct, profiling, and the alleged existence of an unauthorized group known as Circle 7. He didn't raise his eyes from his papers. Alana didn't flinch. "Do you have an opening statement?" he asked. She shook her head once. No speeches, just evidence. She opened the case. What came out wasn't a single file, it was a stack of binders, labeled, indexed, dated. Each one was color-coded by type. Red, officer misconduct reports. Blue, civilian testimonies. Green, internal communications. Black, suppressed body cam footage logs. Gold, confirmed victim cases including minors. She slid the first binder across the table. The board members didn't touch it, so she opened it for them. Page 1, Officer Grant Mercer, Langston and Blythe. Footage, March 7th, 10:13 a.m. The still image showed Alana's face, captured by a security cam, eyes calm as she was being accused. Page 2, Dispatch transcript, Officer Mercer's call. Female suspect, black, refusing to cooperate, appears agitated. "Now," Alana said, her voice steady, "please turn to page 5. Another image. This time, a 17-year-old girl, Yasmin Dunley, standing with her hands against the boutique's wall, her backpack sliding off one shoulder. A timestamp in the lower corner proved it was 3 years earlier. Same officer, same posture, same script." Alana paused. No probable cause, no charge, no complaint logged. She was just walking home from school. The panel was silent. She closed that binder, opened the next. Over the next 40 minutes, Alana did not lecture. She did not plead. She presented. Charts showing racial disparities in pedestrian stops. Cross-referenced body cam footage files that mysteriously stopped recording mid-incident. Notes from officers who had been reassigned or pressured into silence after reporting internal abuse. A handwritten testimony from Olivia Dunley, Yasmin's mother. Audio of a 911 call from Yasmin, breathless and crying. "I didn't do anything. Why is he yelling at me?" The words echoed across the chamber like a haunting. A woman on the panel flinched. Still, no one interrupted. Not even when Alana said, "This isn't an accident, it's a structure, and structures don't collapse on their own. Someone has to pull out the first stone." She placed one final file at the center of the table. Unlabeled, untitled, inside every internal document connected to Circle 7. Meeting notes, emails, disciplinary alterations, officer transfer logs. And then she said the words that split the room in half. "You didn't lose control of this system. You built it to function this way." A long silence followed. It was Chief Ethics Officer Dr. Madeline Rourke who finally spoke, softly but with precision. "Commander Rivers, do you understand the implications of what you're suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Alana replied. "I'm documenting it." Another long pause. Then something unexpected. A voice from the back row. "I'd like to speak." Heads turned. Officer Jonah Briggs, a white SWAT officer who had served under Alana 3 years ago, stood slowly, a manila folder in hand. He was not scheduled to testify, but he had come anyway. "I served under Commander Rivers during Operation Blue Bridge," he said. "I watched her lead a high-stakes hostage negotiation with flawless control. She was precise, protective, and unshakable." He stepped forward, laying a copy of his own statement on the table. "But last year," he continued, "I saw Officer Mercer stop a 14-year-old boy and push him against a fence. No provocation, just assumptions." His eyes darkened. "I didn't speak up then. I do now. No one objected. No one tried to stop him. Because after everything Alana had shown, there was no more room to hide." When Jonah finished, Alana turned back toward the panel. She let a few seconds pass. Not for drama, but to make the silence feel heavier than it ever had. Then she asked one question, and only one. Where is the justice America claims to stand for when black officers are profiled in their own uniform? Her voice didn't crack, it didn't tremble, it landed like a hammer against marble. And for the first time, the faces at the table didn't look like officials anymore. They looked like people, uncomfortable, cornered, human. Alana stood slowly, gathered her binders, and nodded once to Leah in the back. She said no final words, because truth, once spoken clearly, doesn't need a closing statement. She walked out of that room the same way she walked in. Head high, shoulders square, eyes forward. Not because she had won, but because she had forced the system to feel its own weight. The hearing ended without applause, without camera flashes, without a single raised voice. But outside the closed doors, something had shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it was real. A crack had formed, right in the heart of the institution that had once silenced every dissenting breath with policy, every truth with paperwork, and every cry for justice with the word procedure. And that crack was growing. The next morning, headlines quietly began to trickle in. SWAT commander's testimony uncovers racial profiling network in state enforcement. Circle 7 accusations raise questions about officer misconduct oversight. Public hearing reveals pattern of suppressed complaints against minority civilians. The local news called it unprecedented. The department called it under review. And Alana Rivers? She said nothing, because she had no interest in commentary. Only in correction. At headquarters, the reaction was instant and divided. Some officers nodded at her in the hallway, a rare gesture of respect in a place where loyalty was currency. A few even whispered words of quiet support. About time someone said it. We've known, just no one ever had the guts. But others turned away as she passed. The air grew colder around her office. Conversations hushed when she entered a room. One colleague left an anonymous note on her windshield. You should have stayed in your lane. She didn't flinch. She just folded the note, filed it in the back of her binder, and labeled it. Response pattern, internal threats. Even the backlash was becoming part of the documentation. Meanwhile, the civilian response began to build. Emails, letters, social media posts with the hashtag Stash say her name Yasmin Tash we see you commander. A mother from Mississippi sent her a picture of her daughter holding a sign that read, Thank you for standing where my brother couldn't. A college student from Ohio wrote, You made me believe I'm not invisible anymore. A retired black officer from New Jersey sent a handwritten letter. They tried to bury you. Instead, you planted a flag. Alana read every message. She answered none. Not out of pride, but because she knew the work was far from over. 10 days later, Officer Grant Mercer was officially suspended from duty pending formal charges. But what shocked the department wasn't just the suspension, it was the new charges added to the case. Not only profiling, not only false reporting, but a newly resurrected case from 3 years prior. The psychological assault and public shaming of minor Yasmin Dunley, resulting in indirect fatality. The charge? Abuse of authority with irreversible psychological harm. The prosecution team had reviewed the security footage, the dispatch transcript, and most heartbreakingly, Yasmin's audio from the 911 call. Her trembling voice, once ignored, now stood at the center of a case that could change the precedent for how indirect harm by law enforcement is recognized in court. When the news broke, Olivia Dunley, Yasmin's mother, was escorted to the courthouse through a side entrance. She didn't wear black. She wore her daughter's favorite color, a deep, defiant purple. Alana met her in the hallway. They didn't hug, they didn't cry. They just stood together for a moment. Two women forged in fire, bound not by tragedy but by the decision to not let tragedy win. Olivia handed Alana a folded photo. Yasmin, smiling, in her school uniform, head tilted as if mid-laugh. I wanted you to see the girl before the silence, Olivia said. Alana nodded, eyes fixed on the image. She mattered. And now they'll have to say her name where it counts, in court. Chief Samuel King, the man who had stripped Mercer's badge at Langston and Blythe, called Alana into his office 2 days later. The door shut behind her with a finality that usually signaled one thing, retribution. But this time, he didn't sit behind his desk. He stood beside the window, hands clasped. I read every page, he said. Alana said nothing. I also got a call from Washington this morning. DOJ oversight wants a federal inquiry. She raised an eyebrow. Into Mercer? He turned around. No, into Circle 7. A pause. Everything you said, it's going national, Alana. She didn't react with celebration. No smile, no victory. Just one breath, deep, controlled. Then she said, it's not about making it national. It's about making it impossible to ignore. What followed was unprecedented. A federal review panel was assembled within a week. Internal files long buried beneath layers of bureaucracy were unsealed. Quiet deals were canceled. Retirement packages were frozen. And then came the list. 62 names, all officers with connections to Circle 7. All under scrutiny. Some resigned immediately, some lawyered up. A few vanished into early retirement. But Alana wasn't watching them. She was watching the ones who stayed. Those who chose to stand still, finally visible under the light of truth. 2 weeks later, the department's HR division sent an internal email. In response to the recent investigations and departmental testimony, effective immediately, we will no longer honor closed internal complaints as sealed, and will retroactively unseal reports attached to misconduct cases now under review. It was one line, but to the communities once ignored, it was a revolution. Alana didn't celebrate. Instead, she prepared for the next phase. Because the fire hadn't gone out, it had only moved to another room. In a modest training hall attached to the SWAT academy, she stood before a small group of new recruits. No reporters, no camera crews, just her voice and their eyes. Among them, Jaden Coleman, the 17-year-old who had applied for the internship after seeing her testimony. His eyes held a fierce curiosity and quiet rage, but also hope. Alana looked at them all and said, "You won't be tested by drills. You'll be tested by silence. When someone crosses a line and no one else speaks, that is your test. And if you fail to speak, you become the silence that protects injustice. Don't let your badge become your shield. Let it be your vow." Not one recruit looked away, not even Jaden. Back in her office, she picked up a letter that had arrived without a return address. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Monica Elridge, mother of Devon, the boy who had taken his life after being falsely arrested by Mercer years earlier. The letter said, "I never knew if anyone would care. But you did, and because of that, I can finally breathe without shame. Not because my son is back, but because someone finally made the world say his name." Alana folded the letter, gently placed it beside Yasmin's photo on her shelf and looked out the window. The sun was rising, but something else was rising too. Something harder to describe. Justice. Not the kind written in bold headlines or declared at podiums, but the kind that walks quietly into rooms no one watches. The kind that stays after the cameras leave. The kind that listens to stories the world was once too proud or too afraid to hear. And it had a new voice now. Hers. The further Alana dug, the less surprised she became. What shocked others, officers indicted, charges filed, cases reopened, felt to her like a long overdue pattern finally being acknowledged. Not an unraveling, a revealing. But beneath that surface, she sensed something else. Something older. Something designed. A structure that didn't just protect officers like Mercer, but created them. And the deeper she looked into Circle 7, the more she realized it wasn't a nickname, it was a symptom. The disease was something bigger, something hidden in plain sight. She first noticed the name in the margins of an old training seminar roster, barely legible, scribbled beside the printed schedule for a so-called Ethical Command Leadership Retreat. It read, W.O. Alana stared at it for a long time, a simple acronym, but not one she recognized. She cross-referenced department databases, seminar invites, archived staff memos. Nothing, no mention of it in official records. But it appeared again, in the corner of a memo from 2018, this time typed in small caps. Confirmed presence of WOW attendees requested for debrief. It was a whisper inside a whisper. That's when she turned to Leah. And Leah's eyes darkened the moment she heard it. "I've seen that before," Leah said quietly. 3 years ago. An invitation landed on my desk. No header, no department seal, just a time and place. I asked the HR rep what WOW meant. Alana leaned in, and she told me not to worry about it. Said it was an optional leadership culture group for senior command cohesion. "You go?" I walked out before it started. Room full of old white men, all command level. They didn't know I'd been invited. I was the only one who didn't get the jokes. Alana's lips tightened. And that's when you started getting passed over. Leah nodded. They called it White Order Watch, she said. Only once, in passing, like a joke. But it wasn't. It was the spine of Circle 7, the enforcer of silence, the cultivator of impunity. Alana opened a fresh case file. She didn't label it with initials. She gave it its full name, White Order Watch, Internal Command Cohesion Network. And as soon as she started tracking, the pieces fell into place. Officers transferred to soft assignments after use of force complaints, all WO. Tagged. Minority officers mysteriously removed from promotion lists right after attending WOW seminars. Anonymous peer reviews using language like too confrontational, not a cultural fit, or fails to respect legacy norms. Disciplinary complaints rerouted for cultural consultation before vanishing entirely. One name surfaced again and again, Deputy Chief Raymond Knox. He had never been seen on camera, never issued statements, but his signature authorized dozens of internal leadership development sessions. He was WOW's architect, and until now, no one had challenged him. Alana arranged a meeting. No warning, no backdoor channels. She walked into his office just after 9 a.m. on a Monday. Knox looked up from behind his desk, surprised. He wore a soft blue dress shirt and a practiced smile, the kind that only cracks when truth enters the room. "Commander Rivers," he said, standing. "Didn't expect you. What can I help you with?" Alana didn't sit. She opened a folder, laid 3 documents on his desk. 1. A list of WOW retreat attendees over 5 years. 2. A memo requesting loyal alignment assessment on Black and Hispanic officers post-promotion. 3. A hand-signed transfer request for Mercer after the Eden Street incident, bearing Knox's name. "I'm launching a formal complaint," Alana said, "on a system that promotes legacy power over lawful procedure." Knox's smile never left, but his eyes shifted. "Be careful, Commander," he said. "Sometimes good people burn themselves chasing shadows." "I'm not chasing shadows," she replied. "I'm dragging them into the light." The next day, her inbox was flooded, not from the press, from officers, from cadets, from retirees. They had heard what she said, what she did, and they were ready. An ex-instructor at the academy wrote, "I left after being told I didn't fit the vision. Now I know what they meant. WO trained fear, not discipline." A former K-9 handler wrote, "They told me not to patrol with a Black partner, said it looked like an image problem." A rookie who had lasted only 6 months wrote, "I thought it was just me, but every evaluation was rigged, not a culture match. Translation? Not white enough." Alana compiled every statement, every testimony, every hidden file. The next report she sent didn't go to the Oversight Board. It went to the Department of Justice. She wrote just one sentence on the cover. "This is not misconduct. This is organized suppression under color of law." A week later, DOJ officials arrived in unmarked suits. They spoke to no press, they interviewed no civilians, but they didn't need to, because Alana had already built the entire case. She had the roster, she had the memos, she had the patterns. All they had to do was follow the trail. Deputy Chief Knox was placed on administrative leave 3 days later. No ceremony, no warning, just an escort out of his office at 8:15 a.m. And when it happened, dozens of officers, Black, brown, and white, stood silently in the hallway, not to celebrate, but to mark it. Because for once, silence was not being used to protect power. It was being used to dismantle it. That evening, Alana sat alone at the SWAT training center reviewing candidate files. She came across Jaden Coleman's application again, still raw, still rough, but full of something rare. Conviction. She turned the page and saw a handwritten note he had scrawled at the bottom. "I don't want to wear a badge because it makes me important. I want to wear it so people like me don't get crushed by people who do." Alana smiled softly. She stood and walked out into the night, stars cutting through the dark like quiet witnesses. The system had begun to break open, but her work was only beginning. Sometimes, change doesn't begin with noise. It begins in the quiet, in the small rooms, in the eyes of people who, for years, were taught to look down. And now, because of Alana Rivers, they were looking up. 3 weeks after Deputy Chief Raymond Knox was removed, the Justice Department's internal investigation formally classified White Order Watch as a rogue operational entity within law enforcement infrastructure. The language was diplomatic, but the consequences were not. 23 senior officers were reassigned, 9 were terminated, 4 faced federal charges. and for the first time, a list of suppressed disciplinary reports was released to the public. It hit the city like a pulse of light. Names once whispered were now printed in headlines. Incidents once buried under lack of evidence were suddenly front-page confessions. And among the names was Officer Grant Mercer. In court, Mercer looked smaller than anyone remembered. Gone was the self-importance, the belt-grabbing swagger. He sat in a pressed suit, hands folded, jaw clenched. But Alana wasn't there for vengeance. She sat in the back, in plain clothes, beside Olivia Dunley. Yasmin's mother held a single photo in her hand. It was worn at the corners. The girl in the image smiled softly. No makeup, no filter. Just youth, just life. When the judge read the verdict, Olivia didn't react. Not with a cry, not with applause. She closed her eyes and whispered her daughter's name. That was enough. After the hearing, Alana stepped outside and found a small group of people gathered near the courthouse steps. Not a crowd, just a circle. A teacher, a teenage boy, a former nurse, a janitor in uniform. Each one held a piece of paper, a face, a name, a story. People the system had once ignored, now standing like a living archive. Alana walked past them slowly, and as she passed, each of them lowered their paper and nodded. Not in reverence, in recognition. They saw her, because she had seen them first. That night, she returned home to find a letter taped to her front door. No envelope, just folded paper. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. Typed text wouldn't have done it justice. I'm writing because I never thought I could. I worked nights cleaning an office that used to house police records. For years I thought what I saw didn't matter. But then I saw you speak. And I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was just unheard. So now I'm speaking. There was no signature. Just 5 words scrawled at the bottom. You made the silence stop. Alana pressed the letter to her chest. She didn't cry, but her breath trembled. Because she knew the truth, that power doesn't die from scandal. It dies from exposure. A week later, Alana returned to the Langston and Blythe jewelry store, the place where everything began. It had reopened quietly, but now, just inside the entrance, mounted beside the front counter, was a wooden plaque. The lettering was carved by hand, not fancy, not polished, but deliberate. Here, silence once lived, now truth walks openly. The manager, Howard Langley, stood beside it. No speech, no ceremony. When Alana entered, the staff stood silently, not in stiffness, but in something close to humility. They didn't expect her forgiveness, but they offered her presence a kind of reverence, not for her title, but for what she had refused to allow them to ignore. She said nothing, just stepped forward, placed her hand gently on the plaque, and nodded. Then she left. That was enough. 2 days later, Jaden Coleman arrived for his first official day as a SWAT intern. He wore a shirt one size too big and sneakers with worn soles, but he walked with a stillness that Alana recognized. He didn't greet her with awe. He greeted her with readiness. I don't want to mess this up, he said, eyes locked forward. Alana crouched slightly to his level. You will. He blinked. You'll mess up, you'll fall, you'll question yourself. He looked worried. But, she said, resting a hand on his shoulder, if you remember why you came here, you'll rise again. He swallowed hard, then nodded once. Alana stood back. Let's begin. That afternoon, she took Jaden through the side entrance of the SWAT facility, the one usually reserved for late-night operators, people who'd seen too much and spoken too little. The walls inside were lined with photos, teams, captains, historic raids, but Alana pointed to a new frame just recently mounted. It didn't show a uniform or a badge or a gun. It showed a courtroom. A still frame of Alana standing alone. Behind her, only light. Before her, a wall of silence she was about to shatter. Below the image was a quote, "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth out loud." Jaden stood before it for a long time, then asked, "Do you think it'll change anything?" Alana looked at the frame and said, "It already has." That evening, she sat at her desk. A candle flickered nearby, not for ceremony but for memory. She picked up the case file for Devin Elridge, the boy who took his life after Mercer's false arrest. Attached to it was a new letter from his mother. They tried to call him troubled. You called him a boy. You said his name out loud. Now it won't disappear again. Alana placed the file in a special drawer, one she had labeled in her own handwriting. For the names they tried to erase. Outside, the sky darkened, but in the halls of the department, something was burning. Not with rage, with clarity. Because Alana Rivers had not just exposed a system, she had built a new path through it, one lined with evidence, lit with testimony, paved with every truth that had once been buried under someone else's comfort. And in precincts across the state, quiet revolutions were beginning. Young cadets asking to review footage they once ignored. Senior officers stepping aside for those they once overlooked. Victims being called by name. Not number, not profile, but name. Not everyone welcomed it, but no one could stop it. Because Alana hadn't planted a scandal. She had planted a standard. In Washington, D.C., the buildings are old, the lights are bright, and the silences are strategic. So when the Department of Justice issued a formal summons for Alana Rivers to appear before the Federal Oversight Committee on Law Enforcement Ethics, it wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. She wasn't called as a defendant, she wasn't even called as a whistleblower, she was called as a witness. Because the ripple she started at a jewelry store in one city had now grown into a tidal wave strong enough to make the Capitol blink. Alana arrived in a simple navy blue suit. No medals, no ribbons, no embellishments. Because when you walk into the lion's den with truth in your hand, you don't need armor. The hearing chamber was cold, its walls covered in acoustic panels and congressional flags. At the long, curved table sat 12 federal representatives. Some skeptical, some curious, a few quietly shaken by what they'd read. In front of each was a copy of the Rivers Report, a document now known across law enforcement circles as a turning point in the national conversation on racial profiling, abuse of power, and institutional concealment. Alana stepped to the witness stand with the grace of a soldier who had survived every battlefield they were told didn't exist. "Commander Rivers," began Chairwoman Evelyn Ford, her voice level but respectful. "This committee has reviewed over 700 pages of documentation, witness statements, internal memos, and visual evidence. Your findings named 62 officers, 4 precincts, and 1 internal culture group, White Order Watch, as part of a systematic structure designed to shield misconduct. Do you stand by every page?" Alana looked her dead in the eye. "I do." A murmur shifted through the room. Ford nodded. "You may begin." Alana didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. She began with Yasmin, the girl in the hoodie, the soft voice on the 911 call. She wasn't a suspect, Alana said. She was a student, a daughter, and she was erased not by violence, but by humiliation dressed as law. Then she spoke of Devin Elridge, and Olivia, his mother, who kept a folded photo in her apron for 2 years, hoping one day someone might ask her son's name with sincerity. Alana spoke not like a commander. She spoke like someone who had buried too many stories that never made it to court. And this time, they had all followed her here. She displayed graphs of disproportional stops, audio of officers mocking cultural training sessions, internal messages signed Circle 7 Forever. And most damning of all, the leaked meeting minutes from a WOW session that included the phrase, "Image matters more than equality." We don't need to be right. We need to be silent. Alana paused after that. She let the words settle. Let the room taste what institutional rot actually sounded like. One congressman shifted uneasily. "Commander Rivers," he said, "how can you be sure these officers weren't just acting independently? That this wasn't just a string of bad actors?" Alana didn't blink. Because bad actors don't write policy. A stunned silence followed. They were promoted, protected, transferred, repackaged. You don't get an entire career off a mistake. You get one when the mistake becomes the model. Another pause. Then Chairwoman Ford leaned forward. "What do you want from this committee, Commander?" Alana answered without hesitation. "I don't want a resolution. I want accountability." That evening, her testimony aired on every major network. Clips flooded social media. The still frame of Alana speaking behind a simple nameplate, Commander A. Rivers, was reposted over 10 million times in a single day. Captions read, "She didn't flinch. She brought the silence to court. Not just justice, restoration." People who had never trusted the system began tuning in because they were watching someone who looked like them, sounded like them, and finally, stood for them. Within 2 weeks, the Department of Justice issued Directive 312B, a federal mandate requiring all internal disciplinary records to be made available for public review after 30 days of filing. An independent third-party civilian board in every precinct with more than 50 officers. the immediate disbandment and criminal investigation of any peer culture groups tied to racial misconduct, including White Order Watch. It was the most aggressive policy reform in 2 decades. But Alana didn't post about it. She didn't celebrate. She didn't take a victory lap. Because she wasn't fighting for applause. She was fighting for Yasmin, for Devin, for the janitor who never got her daughter back, for the students frisked in front of their schools, for the mothers who died waiting for someone to believe them. The day after the directive passed, Alana sat on the steps of the academy with Leah. Neither spoke for a while. Then Leah broke the silence. "You realize what you've done?" "No," Alana said. "You've made it impossible for them to pretend again." They looked up at the same sky that had hung over too many ignored stories. It looked different now. Not because it changed, but because someone had finally dared to name the storm beneath it. Down the road, a new class of cadets entered the academy. Among them was Jaden Coleman, his uniform crisp, his expressions steel. He didn't look around to see who noticed him, because he already knew who had cleared the path. In another corner of the city, a small jewelry store had quietly changed its training protocols. Staff were required to watch Yasmin's 911 call and read the final court summary in Devin's case. At the counter sat a new sign. "Every customer is a story. Don't assume the ending." Alana Rivers didn't change the country in a day. She didn't fix every system, but she did something more lasting. She forced the system to look in the mirror, and once a system sees itself for what it is, it can never unsee it again. To be continued in Part 10, the final chapter. Would you like me to continue with the conclusion now? You said continue. ChatGPT said certainly. Here's Part 10, the final chapter of this powerful journey, a conclusion that ties justice, legacy, and transformation into a lasting echo. It's poetic, heartfelt, and unforgettable, approx. 1,500 words. Part 10, her name was never the end. They called it a ripple, but it became a wave. And long after the hearings faded from headlines, long after the officers were stripped of badges, long after the laws were rewritten and the slogans changed, Alana Rivers remained quiet, resolute, unshaken. Not a hero. A witness. A builder. Months passed. A new mural appeared in the heart of the city, just beyond the Langston and Blythe district. It was painted on the side of an old community center. There was no signature, no tag, just a face, painted in deep purple tones, framed by soft curls and a gentle smile. Yasmin. Beside her, 3 words were etched in bold brushstrokes. She mattered. She still matters. No one needed to explain it, because anyone who saw it knew exactly what it meant. In the academy, Jaden Coleman graduated from his internship. Not with top honors, not with the highest scores, but with something rarer. A letter of recommendation, handwritten by Commander Rivers herself. It read, "He doesn't lead with power. He leads with clarity. He doesn't ask to be followed. He walks toward what others fear. He will not be perfect, but he will not be silent." When Jaden read those words, he didn't cry. He just looked up at the sky and whispered, "I'm ready." And somehow, the wind answered. Alana's office, once lined with case files and walls of silent stories, was now a gallery of faces. Some living, some gone, all remembered. She didn't use a filing system anymore. She used a wall of light. One photo for each story brought into the open. One note beside each spoke, stood, survived, believed, didn't bow. It wasn't decoration, it was preservation. A living record that the world tried to erase but couldn't. And then, one autumn morning, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside a card, no words, just a Polaroid. It showed a young girl, maybe 11, smiling at her school locker. She wore a hoodie. Purple, with the letters YD stitched just above her heart. Alana stared at it for a long time, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. The name wasn't just stitched onto fabric, it was stitched into legacy. The city began to shift, quietly but deeply. Police stations painted their glass windows with transparency pledges. Body cam footage policies changed. Citizens could now request access within 72 hours. Community boards received voting power on local disciplinary actions. Formerly erased complaints were reopened and reviewed. Retired officers came forward to testify, not because they were forced to, but because they finally felt seen. And in the heart of it all, they no longer whispered Rivers. They said it aloud, like a bell rung in daylight, not to warn, but to remind. When Alana was invited to speak at the National Police Ethics Summit, she declined. She sent Jaden instead. He stood at the podium in his modest uniform, voice trembling but unwavering. My mentor taught me that justice isn't loud, it's patient, it's steady, it shows up when the cameras are gone. She didn't ask us to follow her, she asked us to never bow again, so now I won't. And when he stepped down, no one clapped immediately. They stood first, in silence. Because some stories deserve silence, not for suppression, but for honor. Back at the academy, Alana packed the last of her things into a single box. A photo of Yasmin, a letter from Olivia, a folded hoodie signed by cadets, and a badge, polished, worn, but never abused. Major Leah Thornton entered quietly, holding a small frame. Inside was a quote, engraved in brass: "The truth does not shout, but it never leaves the room unchanged." Alana smiled. She took the frame, placed it gently in the box, and closed the lid. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I'm just making room for the next one." And so she stepped outside, not into retirement, but into continuation. Because her job had never been about a title, it was about a choice: to speak, to stay, to see, and to never look away again. Somewhere in a city far from her own, a young girl enters a school office. She's been accused of something she didn't do. But the staff pauses. They ask questions. They request video. They listen. Because the handbook has changed. Because the system remembers now. Because someone once stood where no one else dared and refused to flinch. That's how legacy works. It doesn't roar. It resonates. It doesn't break doors. It opens eyes. It doesn't end with applause. It ends with someone like you, picking up the torch. So we ask you now, would you have stood beside her? Would you have spoken up? Would you have believed the woman in the hoodie standing silent in a room that already judged her? And if the answer is yes, then don't just share this story. Live it, because justice is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of 1,000 more. Now ask yourself, if a black woman, silently judged, falsely accused, and publicly humiliated, can stand her ground and change the very system that tried to erase her, what's stopping the rest of us from standing up too? Because justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins in a moment, when someone dares to say, no more. Alana Rivers didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. And the system that once tried to silence her was forced to listen. So to everyone watching, never underestimate your voice. Never assume your story doesn't matter, because sometimes one person standing tall makes the entire world sit up and pay attention. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. Power doesn't come from a badge. It comes from courage. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Stories that challenge injustice, restore hope, and remind us what dignity truly looks like. Until next time, stay strong, stay seen, and stay unshaken.